This is the most controversial episode we have done so far. And by the end, you'll understand why. We like to troll people, or at least eat popcorn on the sideline and just troll, meaning you're watching everything going on. This episode's for you. By the end of this episode, you will understand inflation, minimum wage, capitalism, socialism, how that all works and how it's all intertwined, and maybe some additional information.
With a little health and a little wealth and a lot of love, that's a life that we live. Suits and Scrubs.
Hi again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Suits and Scrubs, where we talk about a little bit of health,
A little bit of wealth,
and a lot of love. I am joined by my co-host today, my very handsome lumberjack husband, who is our finance guy, has managed over $1 billion to date, and has also reached his Coast Fire number. You may have seen our last episode where he serenaded me to a whole new world.
Oh, geez. We lost every bit of fellowship we have. So we're just talking to ourselves at this point.
And fun fact about that is that he actually won second place on an international cruise in a karaoke contest by singing that song. So.
Yeah, well, actually, a fun story about that is people from overseas in Italy do not and cannot sing, even though opera's there. So I'm not that good; they're just that bad.
Gross generalization,
right? And I think I had a little bit of stage presence and swag.
You did.
That's probably what really got the votes.
I recall you throwing your sunglasses on the stage.
I did. We actually have video proof of that. I don't think anyone's ever seen that, to be honest.
Well, maybe our video editors will allow that to come to life.
Private archive. Nothing like singing some karaoke on the cruise. Well, thanks, Em. So we have Emily, MD, who's going to be the MC of this episode. She is double board certified in internal and obesity medicine. She is exploring functional as well as aesthetics, where she believes the power of the patient relies on quality information, so that way they can make better decisions and ask better questions. I don't know if I said that right, but that's pretty much what she believes in. She gave me a look, so I don't know if I said that the way that she wanted me to.
Close enough.
I didn't rehearse appropriately.
Close enough.
Back to you. Back to you, Em.
So we usually like to start off a little bit with our side story. And we've been telling everybody about our experience with IVF. And if you haven't watched our prior episodes, a little background, I have a family history of infertility, of early menopause. My mom went through menopause at 35, and I am now 35. And so had some testing done. My numbers didn't look so great, so we decided to go through the IVF process. We were blessed to be able to do that. Partly because of great benefits that you have, but also it was just something that we felt like we wanted to invest in because we want a family. We want to have someone to give a legacy to in the future. And so
yeah,
we actually talked with some friends today who mentioned that they thought it would be a good idea for us to talk more about that it's not something that's talked about much. It's not necessarily taboo, but I guess, people just,
right.
It's not necessarily something in the mainstream.
Right. I don't know.
Talked about.
I believe that people who do IVF usually have some reason, maybe some health related issue. Maybe they've been trying to grow their family for a while, and it's just a sore subject. And instead of asking a bunch of questions or answering a bunch of questions, they just rather just avoid the topic because it is very common. I usually really close friends talk about that, but we talk about it openly here just because I feel like not only that I think it's relatable because other people do go through it, but also believe that the information and having an MD to guide us, to kind of walk through and tell us not only from her own personal experience, but what medically is going on. I think it's just interesting, stuff. So.
Yeah, I think it can be controversial from maybe an economic standpoint, but also from a religious, spiritual standpoint. It can be a little bit controversial.
Yeah. Which I never really understood that because at the end of the day, if you are diagnosed with cancer, wouldn't you not go for radiation? Isn't that like playing God?
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that maybe there's a lot of pain and emotion behind it, and people just don't want to talk about it because
Maybe
it
that's
brings
what
up
it is.
a
Yeah.
painful topic. So, and the reason why we go into that or bring it up today is that I think maybe a future episode in the near future we'll talk a little bit more in depth about not only our experiences,
Yeah.
but some of the both financial and the health impacts that go along with that, because I think
Yeah.
we're both kind of at that, we have enough information,
No, yeah.
enough expertise in our fields that we can give a little bit more information about it. So
Yeah.
we'll probably talk about that more on a future episode.
Yeah.
for
But let
sure.
us know. Let us know. Go to SusanScrubsPodcast.com. There's a little section that says ask a question. It's right there on the front page. And drop us a line. Like, tell us what you think. Tell us if you want us to dive deeper into that topic. We had a lot of, like I said, like you had said, you had a conversation with some folks today, and they were very interested at everything we talked about. That was one thing that we really just wanted to understand a little bit more, because I think they had their own personal experience, and usually when you talk about that, people know someone going through that, and most people root for people because they want to see them grow their families. They want them to be happy.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah.
So I hate to even bring it up because I don't know if I'm prepared for this, but I lost the speak at your own risk segment of our last episode because I said, obviously.
Speak at your own risk.
In this segment, we created a wheel of punishment.
So don't say the word,
You don't say the word
or we'll have to spin the wheel.
and do the punishment. But yeah, so rhyme time. Rhyme. Do you want to tell everybody what that is?
So technically, rhyme time is supposed to be a punishment, an embarrassing punishment, where the person who loses has to come up with a poem or a rap or some sort of rhyme that somehow ties to that day's episode.
Yep. So my rhyme is radical. And I chose that word on purpose, as you know.
So I have to actually rhyme that word.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I can't drop a beat, but I'll boom, 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 boom. That's the best I got.
I was so burnt out that I took a sabbatical. Now we are talking about finances that are radical. Roses are red, violets are blue. I don't know a lot about finance, but I know you do.
Oh,
So that will give us a little
That's-
segue
that's good. That's good.
into the topic of today. I guess we also didn't really mention our 30-day challenge, which I'll briefly mention. This month we are...
Who gave you the approval, the green light, ding,
the green light?
for finances for our 30-day challenge?
Who gave us the green light? Our 30-day challenge board?
No, I'm talking about we talked about it before this and we priced it out, and I said no initially because I'm the finance guy.
Oh, yeah.
Not that she doesn't have a say, so don't send me hate mail. But we talked about it, and
We do have a budget, and we have to stay within that budget, especially because I'm not working this month or not working full time, which hopefully will change in the next month. But we have to have tight budget right now.
that's right.
So we decided after we did the 30-day challenge during our last episode, or the 30-day challenge board decided for us that we were going to be doing the Acromantia challenge, which was taking Acromantia supplements to try to help balance our gut microbiome, which we've talked in prior episodes how important the gut microbiome can be. It's probably more impacted by the foods that you eat, the prebiotics, and sometimes the probiotics in food, but really the prebiotics are most important. But some of the studies that have been done on Acromantia, I think, are really interesting. And, I think it's relatively safe. I'm not saying do this necessarily at home, but we feel that it's safe to try the probiotic supplement. And so we're going to hopefully do some stool testing before and then maybe answer some questionnaires before so that we can actually compare our before and after in a more objective way. So we will let you guys know how that goes over the next 30 days.
Yeah. We'll plan on ordering it tomorrow. And then, so we do record these episodes in batches. So we'll do 2 at a time. So in our next episode, we'll talk more about it, just in case you don't listen consecutively, or you don't care about health, your team wealth.
But let's be honest, I think all of us care a little bit about both.
That's true.
Maybe.
I was going to say, let's be honest, everyone cares about me. I was really hoping that you were going to do that, because that's something I'd probably say.
So are you
You're
ready?
such a saint.
Are you ready to get to
Let's jump into
today's
it.
topic?
Yeah.
So today's a little bit different. I will say the kiddos should not necessarily be listening because there is some maybe vulgar language.
This vulgar language, this bad language.
Some profanity in this one, because we are talking about brace for impact,
Dun, dun, dun.
explosive internet wars. We're going to be talking about some
Explosive what?
internet wars.
Yeah. But wait a minute. So how many times have y'all listened scrolled through Facebook or scrolled through Reddit, and you see this real juicy forum, and these people are insulting each other, bashing each other, and you're like over there rooting for go. You're rooting for one, and you're not rooting for one, and then that person makes a good point. That person's like, what? And that person's like, hey, I like rainbows and butterflies. Like, what are you doing? Like, that has nothing to do with what's going on. This episode is for you. If you like to troll people, or at least eat popcorn on the sideline and just troll, meaning you're watching everything going on, this episode's for you. Very controversial, though. So we are here at Suits and Scrubs. We do not talk about religion usually, politics, and so obviously you can't talk about this one without having some sort of politics. Yeah, for sure.
So this was a Facebook friend of Zach's who is very passionate. We like to refer to her as, and then word of the day, radical. Ding, 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 radical Ruth.
Yeah.
Who has very strong opinions.
Very strong opinions. But listen, this is one thing I'll say about Radical Ruth. We don't even want to use your name because we didn't get your permission to do that. But she is very passionate. I think in this country, one thing I love about America is you're able to express your opinions openly and freely. Freedom of speech. And believe me, Radical Ruth exercises that to the nth degree. And she's passionate about the subjects that she talks about. I know, and she's been, like I said, she's been a friend of mine for a very long time. And this one's hot. This one has a lot of comments.
So
93 to be exact.
93 comments. So obviously it incited some debate. But we are going to, I said obviously.
I'm just kidding. Don't worry, it's not your word.
Can't help it, it's my filler.
It is your filler.
It's my
It's it's bad. You know.
Obviously.
I told Emily, I said this last time, I don't care, I'll say it again. But Antoine, that says, obviously, people are hide your kids, hide your wife, they're raping everybody out of here.
You're not.
Go ahead, babe. We're getting off topic today.
So subconscious. Okay. So do you want to say what the initial comment was?
Yeah, sure. So the initial comment that Radical Ruth with 93 comments, she said minimum wage should be $27, period.
That's a statement right there.
That is a statement. And so by the end of this episode, you will understand inflation, minimum wage, capitalism, socialism, how that all works and how it's all intertwined, and maybe some additional information. I think it's important because no matter where you are, the economy impacts everyone. Everyone. Our U.S. economy impacts everyone internationally as well. That's how powerful our economy is. And I believe that these topics are so important because at the end of this episode, I am going to give some calls to actions to people who want to get involved and feel like they can make a difference, because there are some things that you can do. I don't think just debating it online, expressing your opinion is the only. I don't think that's a form or a method to take action. I actually never been a big fan of that. I used to participate when I was younger, but I didn't know any better. I don't mean that crass, but I just feel like I just reserve those conversations around a dinner table, close friends. But if I really feel passionate about something, I'll actually volunteer, vote, donate to a cause, whatever it is. That's how I get involved versus just being on the sideline, just having a megaphone. Meh, 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 meh.
Just hearing yourself talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to actually verbatim kind of lead you through these comments, and we'll, I guess, take some breaks in between to put our own 2 cents or put your 2 cents in.
Both.
So you want to get started?
Yeah, let's get started. So how this is going to work is I'm going to do Radical Ruth. So every time I talk, it's only Radical Ruth. Emily MD is going to read out comments verbatim, but how the people are commenting.
Yes.
So
and we're protecting identities here. We're
Yes.
not saying names. We're not
saying
giving
names,
identifying information.
yeah,
There is one commenter who we will refer to as Patriotic Pat, who has a lot to say
yeah,
in rebuttal to Radical Ruth.
Yep.
So, but everyone else will just be a responder
yeah.
or a commenter. So I will go ahead and kick this off.
This is, by the way, this is a new kind of format today, but I'm super excited. This is the most controversial episode we have done so far, and by the end, you'll understand why. Go.
Okay, so Radical Ruth's initial comment was that minimum wage should be $27.
Yep.
So our initial commenter says, "No, but seriously, I was expecting my job to raise the pay this year, but nothing." And then Patriotic Pat says, "When it is, expect to pay $20 for a burger and go ahead and double your rent." Which I feel like is what a lot of people say when that is.
Yeah, and we're going to discuss it in the end.
So someone responds to Patriotic Pat and says, "Why would you expect someone to work for gas money when things have doubled?" I don't know what that means.
Yeah, I don't think we did a test run. We don't know what that means. So
Was that a rainbows and unicorns comment?
maybe, but I don't know how anyone would work for gas money. I don't know. If you think you know what that means, drop us a comment because we've been trying to decipher that bad boy for a while. All right, Radical Ruth says, "Honey," it tags Patriotic Pat. "People are already paying $20 for a cheeseburger, and that's just a vegan burger. Also, that's not how inflation works. Inflation has been happening massively without wages being raised. Wages aren't catching up." And she posted a picture from DoorDash for a vegan burger. And I would say this, I'm not knocking anyone on this, but I think if you post a DoorDash vegan burger, DoorDash adds about 40%. So if you are concerned about saving money, things of that nature, yes, I said it, I don't care. I'm not sure ordering on DoorDash is viable because it is very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're paying for the convenience.
Exactly.
So someone else responds to Patriotic Pat and says, "For years, everything has went up except for minimum wage."
Radical Ruth, "Capitalism is what causes inflation." Capitalism. Radical Ruth says again, "Telling you wages going up will cause inflation is just lies from the government to keep you tame and work like a slave of labor. Wages haven't moved since the early 2000s. And look at inflation. Stop believing the lies and burn down corporations." Radical Ruth also says, "Don't even get me started on the pieces of wanting to raise retirement to age 70. When most people die at age 76, including politician, the See You Next Tuesday from See You Next Tuesdayville in the South, y'all need to stop voting for these that are ruining our lives." And then she goes on and on. So we're not going to read everything here. So Leah, let's take a moment to discuss this. So they talked about inflation. What is inflation?
So inflation is the increasing cost with decreasing value. Is that
Almost.
the depreciation of the dollar?
Well, yeah, I would say that has a lot to do with it. But what happens with inflation, inflation really is the cost of goods and services increasing, which erodes the power of the dollar. Inflation is measured by two different ways. One is the consumer price index, and the other is the producer price index. So the consumer price index it measures month over month. I believe it's a monthly analytics report, and it has very specifics for food, services, and say, hey, gas is $3.17. It was $3.15, nationwide. And the reason why this is important is because you can understand exactly how much your dollar goes. And for the producer price index, it can get really technical here, but there's like 3 different ways. It just measures how much services are, or goods and services are, from the employer standpoint. So you measure both of these, and you could break it down. I think it's called crude, where you measure the raw cost of goods of sold. So let's say that I'm just thinking like a chocolate bar, and cocoa. So let's say cocoa has increased. And then you think about that.
What it costs to produce that good.
Exactly. But that's just one. There's like 3 of them. So it really understands exactly, why corporations, why businesses are selling. So I think it's important to understand what inflation is and why does it matter. So inflation is so hot right now, and arguably like cryptocurrency, there's only so much of Bitcoin, and it goes into the blockchain technology, which I won't get into today. Maybe if you guys are interested in Bitcoin, I might have someone speak on Bitcoin that I know. And one of my friend groups is a very avid Bitcoin investor. But if inflation is not kept in check, there are loss of purchasing power, so the value of the dollar. You also have uncertainty and volatility, international competitiveness. So as you sell goods and services, our costs are higher, and I think if you look at some international companies or countries, if you travel like Thailand or the Philippines or Bali even, the dollar goes so far because their local economy is like, the value of their dollar is not as high as ours, as if that makes sense.
They're able to produce more at a lower cost? Is that?
No, I don't think they can produce more at lower costs. It's actually, I'm gonna say the opposite. It's just they're not able to, like steak and lobster over there is like $5. When over here it's like $20. But that is how much it costs for them and their income. So it takes a certain amount of dollars for that to be worth that much. $5 is a lot to them, right?
Yeah.
So that's how that ultimately works. And so how inflation is regulated, which is important for this, and I'll probably hit on these topics somewhat again. Inflation is regulated by the Fed, by the banks, and it ties to your interest rates. Right now, interest rates are 7.1%, which is pretty high. I didn't realize that are high. I actually looked them up today. And how inflation is regulated is they tighten the money supply. So the Fed makes it more difficult for banks to borrow money, also reverse, like if you want to buy or have a mortgage or car, whatever it is, that's based upon that interest rate. So that way they tighten that up. So it's more expensive to borrow money. And the fiscal policy is also in place there. So the government will issue pretty high yielding like bills and bonds. And what they do is they gobble up the money because, hey, we're offering these bonds for 5%, 4%, 6%, whatever it is. And that way there's less money out there. So I think cash is king right now. So if you have cash or coming into a large pool of cash, I think you should definitely hold on to that because I think the value of that. There's other things of how inflation is regulated, but we'll get into that in a second. And I think we should read a little bit more, but there's other things to hit on here, like minimum wage and all that too. And by the way, guys, I am looking down if you are watching our YouTube channel. The reason why I'm looking down is because I watched over 10 plus hours of economists, all that, to make sure the information I'm providing to you is relevant. I live, breathe, and sleep this because I do work in lending. I work for a bank. Also, I've taken economy classes, but just want to make sure the outline and what I'm sharing is very relevant. So yeah.
So we can, I guess, move on with the comments. And these are responding to Radical Ruth. Another commenter says, this is a good example. People spend their money on the dumbest. The biggest problem is people trying to live outside their means. And then Patriotic Pat says to Radical Ruth, there's a sucker born every minute. Which system do you think works better?
And Radical Ruth says, you have to have a mixture of capitalism and socialism, but capitalism should never be 100% or even more than 50%. Don't forget, I live in a different system and was much happier. The United States is garbage, and if I could move again, I would. So pretty much she's saying that she did live internationally for a while, so she's kind of basing her opinion based upon that.
So Patriotic Pat says, socialism, with a bunch of laughy, cry faces. Socialism is great until other people's money runs out and the government starts taking yours. And then he addresses Radical Ruth and says there are planes leaving every day, telling Radical Ruth that she is welcome to leave the country. So another commenter responds to Patriotic Pat and says, minimum wage has been $7.25 for 15 years and prices still went up anyway.
Radical Ruth tags that individual and says, these people cannot be reasoned with. They love being the government and corporations. Yes, I just said that on this podcast. Yes, I'm reading this verbatim. They were brainwashed by capitalism propaganda, and there's no light at the end of the tunnel for them. All right, lots to discuss here. So so we talked about inflation, what it is, how it's regulated, what happens if it's unchecked. Now let's talk about minimum wage. So minimum wage, this is a fun fact. It was originated in New Zealand and Australia back in the 19th century. That's where the whole minimum wage concept began. And underneath the Fair Labor Acts of 1938, the United States adopted this and set 25 cents as a minimum wage per hour. And I can get more into the Fair Labor Standards Act. So I remember, I don't know if folks remember this in history class, where you see a bunch of children in factories and you see these ultra rich people, and the divide of the wealthy and the lesser stricken people were pretty significant. You know, it was a huge gap there. And so it is important to understand the 725. And I did do some math here, and usually I wear glasses when I do math.
Is the math in today?
The math is definitely mathin'. Okay. So check this out. If you were making $7.25 per hour, which is the minimum wage right now, which I didn't know was that low. And I'm not a socialist.
I used
I'm
to
not
make $5.50 an hour at
I
Venice
was like
Pizza.
$5.15 my first job. No, $5.75. I was so proud because I made 50 cents more than
Gosh, I
minimum
used
wage.
to make $10 an hour in residency.
Jeez.
If you on the weeks that I worked 80-hour weeks, I'm sure it
$10 an hour.
$10 an hour. But anyway, we digress.
We digress. So if you make $7.25 per hour, that is 1,160 40-hour week times 4. That's before taxes are taken out. So the average rent in America right now is $1,100 to $1,500. People are like, "Where is that rent at? My rent is $20." Yes, it is. That's the average. Bear with me. Yeah. Average grocery bill is $300, $800. The average child care, which is astronomical, is $600 to $1,200 per child. This is monthly. The average transportation cost, which really just shocked me, was $813 a month for families. So this is this is like $3,000 a month without having any extras. $3,000 a month. So that is 3 times what minimum wage is. But Congress does have in legislation right now, they're very interested in raising the minimum wage to $15, which is will be about $2,400. Is that livable? No, but it's more, it's more reasonable based upon where they are. And so one thing that Radical Ruth talked about was socialism and capitalism. And I can hit on these other topics in just a second. But socialism is the idea of where the government programs owns things like healthcare, jobs. Usually you're taxed a lot higher. And
a lot of people think of it as like the Robin Hood mentality.
Yeah.
which might be simplifying things a little bit, but
Yeah, I could see that. But it's really everyone
yeah.
that's impacted. But, the more money you make, you're more taxed, and you're given that tax is then given to others, which, there's pros and cons of that, which I'll get into after we read a little bit more. Capitalism is like private equity, ownership, free markets. And yeah, so there's some pros and cons with this, but I won't get into that. But one thing I want to say about minimum wage, and this is where, actually, let me hold that, because Radical Ruth gets really into depth in that topic, and she talked about it already, but I don't have to divulge everything right now. Okay. So Radical Ruth says, it's so funny that people waited their whole lives for trickle down and never does. And the studies show it doesn't work. But people hate facts and love being brainwashed by propaganda and love being used and abused because they were told to accept it.
So someone responds to Patriotic Pat, which I can't even remember what Patriotic Pat said last time.
You mean?
Okay, so she said, you mean like they already are and have, talking about how government takes everybody's money.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Taxes.
Okay. Someone else responds to Radical Ruth saying, my dad and his wife work at a major corporation. They have for years, like over a decade, and they were making $12 an hour in a small town in the Midwest. My dad, who is retirement age this year, but actually can't afford to fully retire, has a bad back. So even with a doctor's note, they threw a fit because he needed to sit in a stool while working at the cash register because of chronic health conditions.
And Radical Ruth responds to this person. This corporation abuses their employees so much. They've been sued time and time again for the abuse. This country is also stupid as not let anyone check out people sit down. It doesn't require standing for the whole time. Again, it's manipulation and keeping the man down, pretty much what she says. She goes on and on.
And that prior person responds saying, exactly, COVID showed us who society would collapse without, and yet they are the lowest paid positions and often looked down on. But they were literally essential workers. It feels like they deserve more than $12 an hour. And then I think she also goes to mention how LPNs are, that they make sometimes less than Costco employees or
Right.
other grocery store employees.
Right. But let's discuss this. This is a lot here. So to unpack this, they're talking about, and this corporation, by the way, this is a brick and mortar store. I believe that these positions are stockers, cashiers, that sort of thing. And there may not be a lot of jobs in these areas, and I don't want to assume here, but a lot of people believe this. I'm not saying I believe this, but I'm going to throw some few thoughts out there. And some people believe that these positions are really for like students and, people that just starting out in their careers, like less than 20, 25. In fact, I did read that based upon the U.S. Department of Labor Statistics, most of these jobs are filled by those, but not all. In fact, some of them even claimed, I think 50% or so, said that these positions actually are filled by folks who have families. And I don't know how anyone can live off $7.25 an hour or $12 an hour for that matter, especially the way we are now. So, this is a pretty big issue. I will say this, though. In the capitalist sort of mentality, environment, if you would, you're paid based upon demand. So there's a supply and demand, just like in everything else. Like that's economics. And jobs are supply and demand. So based upon how many cashier jobs are there? How many front service jobs are there? What's the skill level of these jobs?
That probably raises a whole other question about
They're more generalists.
whether some of these jobs become obsolete with technology
AI and all that.
AI,
Yeah. But that's not for this discussion. But what I'm saying is like these skills are very general.
Yeah.
So if someone fresh out of college or fresh out of high school, someone
who
is
hasn't
16,
yet learned
17,
a trade,
exactly,
if they're
or
just trying to
learn
yeah.
basic math and have basic human skills, you can get these jobs. So these jobs are allocated for those specific types. So if you think about that, I think that supply and demand works well here because those specific skill sets, there's many people who have those skill sets, right? So I do believe that that's pretty justified. However, I do agree with Radical Ruth and a few other members. I think the minimum wage is pretty low for price of living, standard of living. If you understand the law, now this is not what I believe, but it's you understand the law here. So I'm playing a little bit of a devil's advocate, and I'll give my thoughts on this. Minimum wage was there based upon the ability to not take advantage of workers and to keep up with the cost of living. And it's supposed to reasonably allow individuals to have some sort of standard of living. $7.25 an hour, you do not have that. You don't. But I would recommend, and sometimes you don't have an option here, but we have virtual assistants that work with us. And this is controversial, but honestly, I don't care because, there's some really good, hardworking people. And a fair wage for a virtual assistant, anywhere from $3 to $10 an hour. We will obviously pay more than that, but that's a really good example of a job that is, paid. And this is like, skill sets as Excel and in like Canva, graphic design, posting, social media management, all of that. Here in US, that would be a $20 to $30 an hour, right? And I think that small businesses may be more impacted by this versus corporations. So I do agree with Radical Ruth. I don't think we should burn corporations down. I think that's a little bit radical in my opinion, but I think she's trying to make a point. And I do kind of agree with her that it hurts small businesses, but the corporations, I do think that there is an opportunity there to offset some of that. And Costco is a good example of that. Costco, the average, is hourly wage is $14 to $30 an hour, depending on what location you are in the state. And they offer really good benefits. And I don't know about you guys, but if you look in Costco, if you walk around, people are happier. So, and she'll talk about that in just a second, but I do kind of agree with her on that. Now, how does inflation work with minimum wage? Maybe I'll hold on that because I don't think she's done the whole rant yet. So I'll hold on that. But I think if you look at capitalism and socialism, and then we can kind of move on. If you have any questions, let me know. But there are some dark sides of capitalism. So dark sides of capitalism is sometimes there's very aggressive income inequality. Second one, I'm very, very passionate about because I think that if we don't protect this, we are going to lose it. And what we leave behind for the next generation is going to be awful. Capitalism is not good for the planet. Fast fashion, industrial revolution, fossil fuels. It's not good for the planet. And the other thing is the monopoly.
Yeah, that's what we talk about that all the time.
All the time.
The crazy
all the time.
monopolization of.
Right. And let's go through one
industries.
example. This is actually a really crazy example. And this is a true story. But so Amazon, we all know and love it. I use it all the time. So does it's just so convenient. You just push a button and it just ships to your house. You're done, right? It is very convenient. So Amazon has been known to look at neighboring stores. This is capitalism. And usually who wins is the consumer, which is usually a pretty good deal. And they'll go and they'll send representatives to, let's say Dick's. Dick's is a sporting goods company. And they'll explore like different golf clubs. They'll see what they have in the store. And what they'll do is they'll undercut. And Amazon has trillions of dollars. Is it 1.2 trillion? It's a lot. It's a lot. So Amazon is worth a lot. They have the resources where they can really undercut. And what they'll do is they'll undercut this specific golf club. And now, Dick's over here, or the brick and mortar store, they can't compete with that because they have all the overhead. And yes, they have the online presence too. But usually what happens now is people will do research in brick and mortar stores, but actually buy online through Amazon, it really is a fun fact. But if you think about that, that's kind of scary because then Amazon can slowly put out these major areas. And then when you think about Monopoly, if you start with a game of Monopoly and someone has 16 properties where they own half the board or more, like you cannot win.
You land on their space every time,
right.
and you're going to be paying them money.
Exactly,
yeah.
and it's luck. Same thing with Amazon. So let's say they put them out of business, and then they own that club, and then they jack up the price, and they're the only distributor of that product. This is happening in weight loss medicine, right? And we won't go into big pharma today, but I do think there is a danger there. So believe it or not, I agree with Radical Ruth on a lot of these points. I don't agree with her approach, but I do agree with her some of these messages. But I also disagree with her on a lot of things too. And now socialism, if you take too much money from people who are high earners. So for example, you're a doctor, right?
Yes.
We had an episode of Where Have All the Good Dogs Gone? Mm-hmm. And you sacrifice your life for 10 years, you have all the student loan debt, and you work these ungodly hours. So what if the government took 50 to 60% of your income?
I mean, don't they take close to that already?
No, they don't. So think about what you get and cut that in half.
Yeah.
Why would you be incentivized to do that?
Yeah.
So there's a lack of innovation and incentives when that happens. And honestly, arguably, the quality of care and the quality of products and goods and services, usually if capitalism defines that, then they're usually the best product with the lowest cost wins. And that's with healthcare. Like again, arguably, healthcare in America is very, very good because of capitalism. But then you can get into that, like insurance, administration. We're not talking about that today. They also undermine the individual freedom. So if the government owns all this, then you don't have freedom of choice. You have to kind of go in line with what that is. And then also there's a state dependency. So, parents out there, if your kids are still living with you past 25, 26, and you give them what they want, and like you don't really teach them. And I had this debate with someone at work, this mama at work, who she's telling me that she wants to draw harder boundaries. And I mean, she's working and she can't retire anytime soon because she helps her kids so much. And she said, I just don't know how to say no. I want to help them. I don't want to make it so hard. I'm like, you're killing yourself and you're close to retirement age. So that just teaches them to be dependent on you, and that's okay. When really life doesn't really work like that. They're very, very fortunate to have that. So there's other things here too that we'll talk about around socialism, capitalism, minimum wage, and inflation. But those are the four really big key points.
So let's go back to our comments section. There is another person that comments with a different perspective that says, I'm not certain we should even have a minimum wage. If you bring skill to the table, you'll be compensated to whatever number you want, or decline the job if someone isn't smart or skilled enough to negotiate a living wage. Do you really want them working for you? And then Patriotic Pat says, the problem isn't the minimum wage, that's for kids. The problem is having a $12 an hour work ethic and thinking you deserve $25 an hour. And then someone responds to Patriotic Pat and says, this, ! My husband manages a distribution warehouse, and the guys that work for him come and go because they treat work as an option, calling in all the time, but they want the higher up pay.
Radical Ruth says, people treat work like an option because it doesn't pay enough for it to matter. Ooh. Radical Ruth says at Patriot Pat, deserving $25 is barely livable. In the South, sure. In the South, it's poverty-ridden. It's ran by politicians. But for us in major cities working jobs that are very time-consuming and not easy to do, we deserve livable wages. Radical Ruth says, everyone needs livable wages. Radical Ruth says, I'm sorry, but y'all are a real concept of life outside the small town except what capitalism propaganda feeds you. And then Radical Ruth keeps going at Patriot Paddock. It's not just major cities. It's different states. It's inflation. And she did it in all caps. Skyrocketing while wages stay the same. Please get an education because I feel the dumbassery is in this conversation. You live in one of the most poverty-stricken states in the country, and you are like that. Radical Ruth is not done. You guys probably hear me talk. It's embarrassing how brainwashed you are. I love being in poverty. It's cheaper. She put that in quotes. Laughing my ass off. Embarrassing.
And then someone responds to Radical Ruth saying, well, then I hope none of them are shocked when they are fired and go from receiving a paycheck to absolutely nothing. My husband works hard, and I do think he should absolutely be paid more, but he isn't going to not work because he feels pay should be more. He continues to work hard and prove himself. He gets bonuses for that hard work and a raise every year. You do what you got to do.
Radical Ruth says, and back to not showing up to work, studies show people won't show up and show all out when they're not properly rewarded, aka not paid enough. If people aren't taking the job seriously, it's the business not paying enough for the labor, but y'all just want to be brainwashed.
And then someone responds to Radical Ruth saying, I will step out of this conversation. I love a good debate, but without the insults. Someone responds to Patriotic Pat saying, companies don't care how hard you work. If you're fortunate enough to find one who does, feel blessed. I'm about to make $26 an hour, and I still have to work a second job to support myself and my kids. Not everyone has the money, or we're fortunate enough to learn the skills you need today to find a decent paying job. Not paying your workers a livable wage is a damn crime, but it's probably easy to say it's not when you're not in that situation.
And then Radical Ruth says, exactly. So let's pause here. So they are talking about minimum wage. It should be $25, $26. It's a crime. Someone even said that minimum wage, if they, someone expects $12 an hour, but expects $25, minimum wage. I think this is interesting. I think there's two sides of this coin. So the first side of the coin is, I do agree with the lady that stepped out of the conversation because she didn't want to go through all the insults. Because I empathize with that. The harder you work, the luckier you get. I do believe that, and I believe that first generational wealth is very hard to break into. And as you enter that generational wealth, you then pass that on to your legacy and teach them how to build wealth. And so the harder you work, more opportunities you get. I think about your dad who didn't have a golden handshake. He wasn't pulled up. He traveled, and this is not for everyone, but your mom didn't work, which was an absolute blessing for y'all because she stayed at home. But
the cost of childcare probably would have been the equivalent of,
for sure. And she handled the household.
Salary.
Yeah, and there's no joke. Like she paid all the bills. She was the accountant, the tax. It's no joke. It's no joke. Like I relate to that because I do all of that side of it, and then you do all of the householding. And even though we had hired help, but putting that together, that's a lot. But he moved to England. He moved to New Jersey. He didn't want to. He did it because he wanted to provide a life for his family, and he worked harder and harder, volunteered for more jobs. I could talk about so many friends, so many people that in my career. And I've promoted someone 3 or 4 times in the past 3 to 5 years in my career because they wanted an opportunity. They worked their absolute tail off, and I rewarded and promoted them constantly, and they deserve that. So I do agree with her, and I think that the people that are making that minimum wage or making that $12 an hour or whatever it is, I don't know what industry that is. That is an unbelievable wage. I do agree with that, but I do think that there's an opportunity for people to think differently. If you're not working, what else are you doing? Are you evaluate your time?
how are you building your skill set?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How can you become more attractive to jobs? And so I have an ebook that's Grow Your Skill Sets, which is the first one, which is the GIFT method, which I talk about. That's how I got to where I am. I didn't have any like that. And now I'm working around the clock now. I don't want to do this sustainable, but I want to get to a certain place in my life where things do get easier. And things are. There's some less financial pressure that we go through, but it didn't just happen. It didn't just fall in my lap. I'm not saying that folks out there shouldn't work every single moment. I'm not saying that at all. But I think that you do what you got to do. So I do agree with that too. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Any other thoughts or questions that the folks were saying that you want to dive into?
No, I think you can kind of see both sides. It's why it's such a controversial topic because, we have that thought instilled in us that hard work pays off. So it doesn't, you just keep grinding and you pivot and you change, whether that's learning a new skill set or, jumping jobs or changing, doing those type of things, even if you made minimum wage. I mean, I worked at a pizza shop. I worked as a camp counselor. I worked for intramural sports when I was in college, or worked at a retail store making minimum wage while I was growing my skill set, while I
Right.
was getting to where I wanted to go. And I,
Right.
Working technically $10 an hour in residency, because you can't learn that trade without being in it and
Right.
without getting that expertise. And
Right.
so I think sometimes you have to think a little bit more about the pay per hour and what you're getting out of that experience. But I know it's easier for me to say when I didn't have children or I didn't have a spouse to support, and that all changes when you have mouths to feed and
Yeah.
and dependents. So I can't speak from that. I think that's part of the reason why it's so
Yeah.
controversial.
It is controversial. And I think that if you think about it, they talked about, pay $20 for a cheeseburger, which that was discussed up front. And then, the person, and my heart goes out to them, they make $26 an hour. They just can't support a family like that. I like to dig into that more. Does their wife work? If they don't, then what's going on there? And that, I'm not suggesting that that's the way to go, but I think that there's an opportunity of them. I believe that you should invest in yourself so you can make better skill sets. And you don't have to do something you don't love for money. I'm not saying that at all. But if you invest in certain skill sets while you have those, like for example,
Or investments, or
well, I don't even think investments. I don't think you should invest until you break six figures. That's my opinion. But unless there's a higher calling, like if you want to be a paramedic, or there's some people out there who want to do that. They make whatever the salary they make, a firefighter, to make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, depending on where you are. Put $100 down a month. Like that's what motivates you. That's what drives you. But think about my mom. She went back to school with 3 kids, making $25,000 a year, and she slowly became a manager. Then she became an area manager, and then and she just went up from there. We're talking about my parents, like my first episode. So I do believe that there is an opportunity for folks to grow their skill sets. And if you have to pick up a second job, do it if you got to do it to make ends meet. But I think you should invest that time, that energy, those resources into yourself so you can earn more. And there's something out there. Like you can probably find a job that you actually are satisfied in, and you can probably make more wages. And so now, like I want to get to this point, but it hasn't been discussed yet. So maybe I won't talk about that just yet.
So we'll go back to the comments section. Someone responds to Patriotic Pat and says, the minimum wage was literally created so one person could support a family of 4, and there are far too many teenagers who are supporting themselves that deserve a living wage as well. And then someone responds to Radical Ruth saying, it's barely livable in this small town, but getting worse because of the multitudes retiring, fleeing cities and relocating here. They are retirees spending money on land and purchasing 3 times the home at 1/10 of the price. That money isn't going back into local economy nor hourly wages. It's going into their retirement and kids' inheritance.
Yep. Radical Ruth says, yes, correct. They had good lives and can afford to do that. Why not buy land in poverty-stricken areas where it's cheaper? Y'all are literally in poverty and you're happy with it. Make it make sense. You can't afford cost of living going up because your politician in your politician state didn't give a shit about you and your wages. And that's why, and she goes on and on. Everywhere, newsflash, cost of living is going up everywhere. Once again, you all blame the wrong people. You vote for that. Blame yourself.
So Patriotic Pat says, and that's the benefit of capitalism. If your set of skills are worth $27 an hour, there's someone out there that will pay for it. And then someone says, if minimum wage was that high, then inflation will be that high.
Radical Ruth says, y'all really know nothing about inflation, and it shows.
And then someone says, if everyone has more money, they spend more, and that means demand will go up and prices of things go up.
Radical Ruth says, the amount of you who are denial about inflation is alarming and proves why American education system is absolute trash. But it'll cause inflation. Dumbass. Laugh at my. Inflation happens regardless. Y'all love being broke and it's weird. I swear to higher power, y'all all are the reason why this country sucks, because y'all love being used and abused by the system. Go to therapy. I seriously don't want to hear y'all complain about inflation ever again or gas prices while wages stay the same as they do. Bunch of idiots. My God, I'm surrounded by idiots. And then we're going to pause there. Okay, it's a lot to unpack in this little tidbit. Hopefully this is entertaining for you guys. So again, if this episode was just about inflation, capitalism, socialism, I don't think it'll be as powerful as having an internet war, a pretty explosive one as that. And again, I know there's a lot of curse words in this. So as we upload this to YouTube, we will be bleeping them out because we don't want YouTube to demonetize us. But on the podcast, we will not. So this is an interesting debate. And I'm begged to say this. No one on this forum probably is an economist. Economist, yes. And no one has a degree in this area, I would imagine, or studied it to the level that can make these claims. I will say this, that there are two schools of thought around minimum wage and inflation. Does one impact the other? Well, one economist says that because if you have the rising rate of inflation, it allows, like that one person was saying, they have increased income, so thereby they spend more money in the economy. So what's interesting about this is as you raise minimum wage, does that person have more discretionary income? And some others, economists, argue that if the minimum wage increase, then it impacts productivity gains. So I also agree with Patriotic Pat. Like he says that if you increase minimum wage, you also expect to pay more. Mm-hmm. I do agree with that. Does that have to do anything with inflation? Well, I agree with Radical Ruth on that, honestly. So I agree with both of y'all. Y'all are both right. Y'all are both right, in my opinion. And so Radical Ruth is right. She says that this is not only inflation. Inflation is impacted by the rising cost of minimum wage, but I do believe that the businesses will pass that cost to the consumer. So it's like a chicken and egg thing. You raise prices, or you raise minimum wage, you raise those wages,
and then in order to pay for those workers or the increase in wage, then you raise prices.
Right, because most companies want to be profitable.
Yeah.
And could they absorb it? Some corporations could absorb it. So
they take it to a different country and they get cheaper wage labor, and Americans are out of jobs.
That's also exactly right.
It's that's why it's so controversial.
It is controversial. This is not an easy problem to solve. I think we all can agree, and these are my closing thoughts, so I won't get too much into this. I think we all can agree that this is a very difficult topic. And a lot of people feel very passionately about capitalism and socialism, minimum wage, inflation. They all kind of go together.
I think a lot of people are in the middle too.
Yeah. I do think a lot of people in the middle. And I think that I believe in healthy balance with everything. And like, for example, I ran 5 miles today, but I'm having a glass of wine right here. Mm-hmm. What are you having?
Also a glass of wine.
Oh, are you? I just led the witness.
I don't know if that's fair.
I have to wake you up because you look a little tired over there. It's been a long day, y'all. We got up, we did a 7 outfit change. Wine was the speak at your own risk.
Well, that's not fair if you say it first.
We didn't write the rules, but for now, you got to spin the wheel.
I don't think that's fair.
I don't think it's fair.
I think ethically, let's have another episode about your ethics and morals.
Oh, are you mad because you had to spin the wheel?
All right, ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I don't think it was fair either. Actually, now that I think about it, is it too late?
Rhyme time again. Maybe I'll just do another poem next time.
I don't think that's fair. I actually don't think it's fair. Because I said, wine, what are you having? That's not fair. But you know what? We can do that if we want to be jerks. I want to be a jerk this episode.
Do you want to be a jerk?
I want to be a jerk this episode. So rhyme time next time that I go.
I was nice to you.
Well, you can lead me. Now.
Oh, it's on now.
Now you're going to try to get me to lead it. Actually, it's kind of fun. That is kind of fun. Just
We're going to have to come up with more punishments.
Yeah. All right. Sorry about that. We digressed there, but that's speak at your own risk. So a little side quest that we have embedded in these episodes. So the chicken and the egg. So if you do that, then companies will pass that cost on to the consumers, and the prices will increase, and then it's just a never-ending cycle. What happens? I'm on the fence as far as I do believe that the minimum wage, teenagers can't live at a minimum wage. Again, I do think that they should invest in themselves. The United States is a very capitalist country, and entertain this idea with me, because I was just thinking about this, and this is just the thought process that I have, and I can be totally off, and I didn't read this anywhere. This is what I just believe. Two sides. One is I think technology is replicated so much, and there's so many conveniences in the world that people who are living, I do think that they should have access to some conveniences that make our lives easier. And arguably we do here in the United States. We do. I do think that folks should contribute to society. I just don't think that people should not contribute to society, because I just don't think that's fair. But I do think that. The other side of that.
Because there are people that game the system, and
there's people that game the system. There's people that take advantage.
Yeah.
For sure. On the flip side of that, I do think that, I don't know if I should say that. I'm just thinking how to phrase that. Yeah, maybe I'll put that in my closing thoughts. Maybe it's not as relevant here. Okay, let's just continue with the conversation.
All right, so they're talking about now bringing student loan debt into the conversation. So what does Radical Ruth have to say about student loan debt?
So Radical Ruth says, I have no student debt loans. Student debt should be forgiven, but you people act like interest doesn't exist and doesn't think it's a massive scam. Crazy how people have $100K in student loan debt and have paid over $100K to pay it off and still have $100K in debt. Y'all legit love being over and conned by the system.
And then someone responds to Radical Ruth saying they are all like sheep. They baa and follow in line.
Radical Ruth says, yep, they do whatever they're told.
And then someone responds, I have 2 grandkids that got degrees and got paid to get them. If you borrow something, you have to give it back.
Radical Ruth says, people do pay it back, and they all still in debt due to the interests. Also, tell that to all the corporations who get bailed out. You don't cry about rich corporations about being bailed out. And it goes on and on about greedy corporations. And so let's take a break here. Let's do analysis of this. And I think that we can stop here, honestly. I think it goes back and forth. I think we got the main points out. So it talks about like buyouts and corporations and all of that. What do you think about all that?
I think it's a double-edged sword, because people will say these corporations are providing jobs. And if you don't bail them out, then you're not only damaging the corporation, but all of those people that work for that corporation. So I guess that's the argument behind the bailouts. And we don't have a system in this country where everything is paid for, where the healthcare, to a certain extent we do, but we don't live in a socialist country where education is fully paid for or medical expenses are fully paid for. But where does that money come from? I mean, you're going to be taxed more to be able to pay for those services.
I don't agree that student debt should be forgiven. I think that people decide to choose, and
maybe the interest shouldn't be so high.
I do agree that interest shouldn't be so high. So Radical Ruth, I do agree with you, but I don't agree with you that student loan debt. I do think there should be some interest because there is an opportunity cost. When you have money, you have the opportunity cost that you're putting it into the stock market, the real estate, you're investing it. But instead of investing it, you're loaning those funds out. And they have a high probability of getting paid back, especially like doctor loans. You know, when doctors actually go to, through the full thing. Interest rates also baked in also has the risk factor. So the risk factor is there just in case someone does default on a loan. It happens all the time. People go bankrupt, which student loans actually tend to follow you. But people, I know some people that just refuse to pay their student loans, and they're just refusing and they're just accumulating interest. And they like, what are they going to do to me? Like make me pay when I'm 80, in that scenario, I don't know what they're going to do, but they just don't pay it. They just don't pay it. They're just like, I'm not, I do know some people like that, and it's more common than you think. So that's interesting. I do think in some professions they should be a little bit more, and they are. Like, for example, they do have some programs for doctors and teachers and all of that. If they do have student loans, if you work for a nonprofit or for a government organization, you do get payback.
Yeah,
right.
Underserved area.
That's right. You do get payback. So there are options, and me and Emily actually explore those options. In fact, we're looking at one now. If we could pay off our student loans faster to move for a very high salary, we are entertaining that. You got to do what you got to do, right? She chose that, career, and yes, there's high earning potential, but she doesn't want to work ungodly hours. So she also gets that too. Like she works more than anyone I know when she was being in primary care and being run ragged, having no energy at the end of the day. Like that's not a way to live either. So I do agree with Radical Ruth in some of that. So some of my final thoughts. We talked about inflation. We talk about minimum wage. I do think that those two are very common topics. I don't think if you raise minimum wage, I don't believe that it impacts inflation to the level that it would. Yes, there's more discretionary income, but I don't think it's at that high level. Can it impact inflation? Yes. So I do agree with that. I do believe that we should probably raise minimum wage. I know that sounds crazy because I am a capitalist. I'm a real estate investor. But if you really do the math and based upon what the law states that minimum wage was put in place for, it's supposed to allow to afford minimum necessities. That's what the law says. That's why it put in place. $7.25 does not do that in today's society. So I do agree with that based upon the law. Do I believe that there should be a minimum wage? I don't, but at the same time, I respect why it's in place. So you're like, are you contradicting yourself? No, I'm not. I'm looking at the law. I'm looking what it's in place for. If we're going to do it, let's do it right. That's what I recommend. Capitalism and socialism. What do I think that we should be? I think that I agree with Radical Ruth. Shocking, right? I don't agree with her percentages, but I do believe that capitalism should exist, and I do believe that there should be a percentage of socialism involved. And that really good example that I just provided around monopoly, what if you're just a lucky SOB and you could just roll doubles, 2 times in a row, and you just get properties left and right? You're just that lucky. We all could work for Amazon one day. Healthcare can be owned by Amazon. I'm just naming one company. Cars are through Amazon. And the thing is, I do think it's a little bit unfair for someone to have billions and billions of dollars and trillions of dollars where the people working for that company are barely making it by. I think that's just weird to me. Yes, you want to be profitable, and I get all that. I invest in the stock market and all that. But I think people who want to live and have a good work-life balance and don't want to gun and work all the time, I think they should have somewhat of a livable wage where there should be some socialism. That's what I believe. I do. I know that's so against my brand, if you would, especially I'm a big avid person in the FIRE movement. I do believe that people should have access to quality wealth to build wealth. But I do believe that there should be checks and balances in place. because I think there's pros and cons for each one. I don't think you should be 100% socialist. I don't think you'd be 100% capitalist. I just don't. So I think people could take advantage. And if you are in those environments where you don't come from generational wealth, maybe you're the first generation college person, maybe the first generation that's a lawyer or a doctor or a high earner position, and you want to help your entire family. I think that's an incredible opportunity, but I think that's just, you should grow, like you can grow your skill sets. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't happen that often. If you're middle class or upper class, you have a higher chance to succeed because you're set up for success. And when you have people in these underserved communities and they have a generational, you can't say, well, you got to think different. You got to work harder. Well, that's just not. Look at your product and your environment. Maybe the school systems are not so good. Maybe you don't have a lot of opportunities where you can propel yourself. Maybe you have no one in your life that's a model for you. Mm-hmm. A mentality like that is not just. You don't just wake up and have that mentality. Sometimes you do. There are anomalies out there.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that could be dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I think about a lot of friends in my friend group who come from these communities and these areas, and they thought differently. But if you look at their family and their circles and their neighborhoods, they'll tell you that they don't have a shot because it's not generational. A lot of, I will say it, middle class Caucasians. This is the statistics. A lot of them help their child with their first home payment, down payment. A lot of families who pass away leave something behind, to help them get a head start in the next generation. These underserved communities don't have that, and that is a head start. So there is some danger there, and I do want to talk about that. So. In closing, I will say this. What can you do about these topics? Minimum wage, inflation, capitalism, socialism. I think people shouldn't just sit on the sidelines and use a megaphone and blast, or talk on the internet and all that. I think some of that can be damaging because there are some really good points here from Radical Ruth, from Patriotic Pat. Like, I think everyone has really good points. And a lot of the points I do agree, even though they're opposing views. And that's like, the messy middle or the middle, right? Yeah. Which I find myself in the middle a lot. But I do think that you can advocate, go vote, volunteer. Education and awareness is important. I think policy changes, and if you really want to get involved, have a career in this. Maybe be economist.
Economist.
I always say that. I always say that wrong. Fun fact about me, I did do speech class up until 4th grade. So sometimes if I get really excited or I'm not nervous, but like have energy, like I can't say the word right. Mm-hmm. That's why if I say your name and I get it wrong the first time and it's close to your name, I'll call you the wrong name every time. In fact, this happened a lot in my professional career. And, if someone's in a different ethnicity or a different religion and you call them by the wrong name, that's not a good thing. But it's just what my brain does. And then, of course, activism. Volunteer, get involved with your local governments and your local communities. That's how you can make a difference in driving out this. But the biggest thing I think you can do is vote. That really is big. And understand policy change, understand education. Don't just go to the internet and find information. Actually read the policy. I think
listen to experts.
Experts.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was watching a New York University debate on capitalism and socialism. You have two of these, older white gentlemen, probably in their 70s, 80s. Mm-hmm. It was boring. I'm not going to lie.
They were getting heated, though.
Yeah, they were getting heated, and there's a lot of information they're dropping that's gems. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I hope you guys actually learned something today. We want to do something different with this topic, so I didn't do any segments. I know it's a longer episode than we normally do, but shout out to Radical Ruth. Thank you so much for letting us use this post. I did ask for permission to use this, and I do think there's some really good points here. And one thing about America, in closing, I'll say this. I love the ability that we have freedom of speech, and we can just think and say things differently. I don't agree with sometimes with the approach, and there's some boundaries that were crossed probably, but at the end of the day, I'm very thankful for that, and it definitely stimulated some good conversation and became a whole podcast. So thank you, Radical Ruth. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and after today's episode, if any of you guys have any questions or feedback, make sure to drop us a line. But thank you for tuning in. Anything to add before we sign off?
No.
All right. Well, we have talked about a little bit of wealth,
A little bit of health.
a lot of love.
And a lot of love.
Bye,
Bye, guys.
He's on the hustle, she's on the grind. There's no time to kill. For saving lives and new deadlines, and there's some holes to fill. With a little health and a little wealth and a lot of love. And that's a life that we live. Suits and scrubs.